Okay, today's class is sponsored by Rabbi Maamar for Refuah Shleima for Rabbi Reichik, Rav Shimon ben Leah. Do you have a Refuah Shleima? Okay.
It's a goose.
Okay. We are on in Torah Or Page, page Lamed Gimel. Here. Okay, first column, 2, 4, 6, 7 lines to the top of the page. The last thing that Rebbe was explaining, that mitzvahs are the garments for the neshamas in Gan Eden. Because Gan Eden is a tremendously great revelation of godliness. It's impossible. It's like a great light that you can't look at. You need something to block it. And through the blockage, it doesn't block it completely. It actually allows you to be able to see it. So mitzvahs, because they come into gashmistic things, and therefore that allows, like he says, the Tarach Amud Earth, the 620 columns of light that connect heaven and earth, and therefore the mitzvahs allow the person in Gan Eden to feel godliness. He says 6 lines on the top of the page of Lamed Gimel. Okay, mitzvahs same levushim. Therefore mitzvahs are gold garments asher yodum tucha neshama, that through them the neshama is able lahasig le'anas hataynik v'aziv began Eden. Then the neshama is able to have this pleasure in Gan Eden. Ozei some mitzvahs saying kumei levush, and therefore mitzvahs are like a garment. She'inyan al-levush. What is the inyan of a garment? She'nabah ba'adam li'asechayis panimi kumei mozin. It's not like food. Food you internalize. Food, when you digest it, it becomes one with your body. It becomes damu basar. It becomes your blood and flesh. The food becomes mamish one with the person. And sustains it. Alpha became. Nevertheless, but garments are not like that. Garments are external. They don't internalize. They don't give you life. But there's an advantage of garments over food, that they come from a higher spiritual source. Food, which is internalized, is what's called the pnimius, mamala, the permeating level of godliness. Clothing, which are makifim, seviv kol, that's the level of the infinite level of Hashem. And therefore, because they come from a higher source, it surrounds the person. And all of him protects him. Menshamma guards him. Therefore, the same thing, mitzvahs which are higher than Torah. Torah is internalizing, you understand it. So that's a level like food. Garments and mitzvahs are like garments. Because they come from the level of makifim, therefore they don't come down here in a permeating internal way. Only by action. As it's known, down here, mitzvahs that deal with physical things are lower than Torah, which doesn't deal directly with physical things. It talks about physical things, but mitzvahs is the physical world, that you're taking a physical leather and wool and making it into tzitzis and tefillin and on all that. So he says, because mitzvahs come from a higher level than Torah, they're makifim, therefore down here, it comes down lower. Just like food down here is lower, that we learned already. There's a Maamar that Rebbe asks in the Torah, why is it that down here there's 3 necessities: food, clothing, and shelter. The chayre of food is more important than clothing, which is more important than shelter. Yet we find food is cheaper than clothing, and clothing is cheaper than housing. The chayre, if it's more important, it should be more expensive. So the Rebbe says the simple answer is because they last longer. Food, you finish, you have to get more food. Clothing lasts longer. Housing even lasts longer. But the Rebbe says, why is that? Because food is pnimius, that's the level of mamala kolam. And clothing is the level of makifim, which is seviv kolam. But it's a level of makif that has to be your size. Too big, too small is no good. Bias is makif, the makif. the ultimate encompassing level, and therefore one size fits all. Therefore, down here, it's more expensive because it comes from a higher source. And he says, "Ochen therefore, aidei ma'isa mitzvahs, nasa b'chinas makiv v'masach." It becomes this protection. Therefore, mitzvahs are the garments of the neshama Gan Eden to protect it. Shaidei mitzvahs tochel l'sanim b'tainig elam erein sof. That's the ultimate purpose. Why the neshama comes into a body. Yidid the Tzerach Aliyah. For the descent, for the sake of elevation. How? Aidei asiyas mitzvahs, by doing physical mitzvahs. Tuchel l'kabel erva taina. It can get the revelations through this Mosach Hanal, through this curtain. Asher mistabesh es ha-neshama b'Gan Eden. That dresses the neshama Gan Eden. B'levushi ha-mitzvahs, with the garments of mitzvahs. U'machmas ki ha-mitzvahs shoshim v'gulkolta v'keser elyon. Because mitzvahs come from what's called the skull, which is on top of the head, on top of seichel, meaning higher than seichel, and the level of keser. Lochein ayidei kiyam ha-mitzvahs v'tzeini yizbarach. By doing mitzvahs. By yem la'seisim dafki, you could do mitzvahs today. In Gan Eden, you can't do mitzvahs. U'lamach l'kabos chayim Gan Eden. Asher yizgal ha'edom, when the regilui of what you accomplish in this world will be revealed then, sheslab eshan neshama b'levush ha-mitzvahs. When the neshama in Gan Eden dresses itself into the garments of mitzvahs that you did in this world, Tesanig ha-neshama, b'tainig erein sof bilti bal gvul. It will become revealed, the infinite, aidei masach levush ha-mitzvahs, asher heim b'chinas mutzoyim. They are the intermediaries, sheshorshim naila, mikol alma, which is higher than all worlds, v'nistal shulamatu b'dvarim gashmi, comes into the physical world. Okay? So the Rebbe is explaining that the whole inyan of what he started explaining over here, the levush of the neshamas in Gan Eden, right? And the neshama has to do all mitzvahs to be able to have the proper garments. If not, the neshama has to come down again and again, like he quoted from the Zohar and Arizal. So he explained what is the concept of mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are higher than Torah. Mitzvahs are the level of makifim. Therefore, mitzvahs, the purpose of the neshama to come down, because Torah the neshama learns in Gan Eden. There's Mesifta the Rakia, there's the heavenly yeshiva up there. But mitzvahs, because they deal with gashmistika things, have to be the neshama in a body, in a physical setting. But because it's down here lower, it originates in a level of makifim, higher than seichel, which is Torah. Torah is the intellect, the head. This is the crown, the tarach hamudi earth, 620 mitzvahs, which are even higher than the head. Therefore, down here they come down into a lower physical aspect, lower than Torah. But nevertheless, that's the garment of the neshama Gan Eden, to be able to enjoy the infinite level of God. And that's why the neshama comes down to do mitzvahs. And he says, Zeu in Maris Hatzeves, that's the inyan of the Maris Hatzeves. It says in the Mishkan, the women brought the mirrors, Maris Hatzeves. And in fact, they brought the mirrors that they beautify themselves. And when they brought it as a donation to the Mishkan, Moshe Rabbeinu, Rashi brings down from the Medrash, that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to accept it. Because they said, this is for vanity. You know, to beautify themselves. Why should that be a spiritual thing? Hashem said, not only are you going to accept it, they're going to make the kiyur, the washing sink, which was the first thing the Kohen did in the morning before they went to do Aveda. They had to sanctify their hands and the feet from the kiyur, from the sink, that was made from the Maris Hatzeves. Okay, so now he's explaining according to Chassidus, what does it mean, the Maris Hatzeves? What is a mirror? A mirror is a glass. Okay, now there's two types, he's going to explain. There's two types of glasses. A glass. There's a glass you see through, and there's a glass that's called a mirror that reflects. One is called direct revelation of godliness, and one is called what's called the backing, or chayza, the returning, like light hits the sidewalk, it bounces back. It's very strong. So he says like this. Kiyesh beis mad is there's two types of mirrors, so to speak. Aspaklaya mi'ira, there's a magnifying glass. Aspaklaya mi'ira means a glass that magnifies. Hainus chuchas habihira, which is a clear glass that you could see, like it's the concept, telescope, microscope, that you could see much further, much better than you can with the regular glass. And that's what Chazal tell us, the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and all the other Nevi'im, all the other prophets, was not a magnifying glass. Moshe Rabbeinu had a greater magnifying glass of Nevuah. And he says, Shebemeshe nema umad evale b'yechidus v'nichte v'mad b'sego, which is lashon dechad, which is masculine. There's mad and mad in Hebrew. Is masculine, is feminine. But Moshe Rabbeinu says mad which is this magnifying glass, even something which is very far, you see it straight. The same thing, Maisa mitzvahs, they come, they're dressed in the Shav in Gan Eden, Bulavusha mitzvahs. They Lavusha now, say they mitzvahs, Maisa mitzvahs now, Yechela Haneshama, Leonis Mizvah Shechina Began Eden. So like this, the Neshama in Gan Eden, even though it's Gan Eden is limited, Neshama is limited, but it's able to see, like he says, Tainug of Ardin Sof, of infinite. Now, how could a finite Neshama see the infinite? Because mitzvahs are like the magnifying glass, that you can see something much bigger and further away. That means mitzvahs are the magnifying glass for the neshama to be able to see a greater level of elokus. Which are therefore they're able to see.
See or sense or feel.
See again doesn't mean with the physical eyes. You're talking spirituality.
Recognize.
When you understand something, you say, "Oh, I see."
Yes.
You don't see anything. It's a concept, just like sight. You can't disagree. If I understand something, you can show me I don't. Right? You can just, prove to me that I don't know what I'm talking about. If I see this thing, you'll bring me a million proofs it's not here. I'm not going to buy it because seeing is believing. So when you say the neshama sees godliness in Gan Eden, it doesn't mean they have eyes. Oh, I see. They feel it. They feel the level of godliness.
Rabbi, I don't understand. If the neshama is a part of essence, how do you magnify it?
You're magnifying the level of God.
You see it.
But the neshama, yes, the neshama originates all the way up there as a part of God.
Yeah.
But the neshama is placed into Bria. It's limited. In the body, it's even more limited.
But it doesn't affect it. It's not supposed to affect it.
Right. But therefore, when it does mitzvahs, mitzvahs become the magnifying glass for the neshama to see a greater level of godliness than that level of neshama which is in Gan Eden.
Even Yechida?
No, Yechida is, that's one with God.
So for Yechida,
There's no difference. Yechida doesn't need to feel God. Yechida is God. The rays of the sun in the sun, which are Yechida, Yachid, united, yeah? There's no ray there. There's only the essence. There's one, that's why it's called Yechida. Hashem is Yachid. Neshama is Yechida, feminine.
That's what they studied for.
What?
That's what they studied for 10 years before they manufactured the
To
work.
prepare for Yechidus. They didn't start, they prepared. They worked on themselves. A person could study and become extremely egotistic.
Become
the worst. Like it says, it becomes this magnifying glass. Without this magnifying glass, the neshamas wouldn't be able to see infinite in Gan Eden, because Gan Eden is bria, it's still limited. That's Moshe Rabbeinu's level. Not with the magnifying glass. Meaning, like the pasuk says, Biyad Anavim Adame. Adame is like similar, like, an image. Resemblance, good. The other Nevi'im had a resemblance of God. Therefore, it's interesting. When all the Nevi'im prophesied, most of the Torahs begin, Ko Amar Hashem. Ko Amar, so God said. Moshe Rabbeinu said, Zehadavar. This is the word God said. So Moshe Rabbeinu is pointing to it, he's close to it. Koi says, it's like, so God said, it's like third party, it's distance. So all the other Nevi'im, the Gemara says, Nisnaba B'Koi, which is the level of Aspakai She'ena Me'ira. It's not a magnifying glass. So they don't see the infinite. They saw what they saw. And therefore all the Nevi'im only got prophecy in a dream. When they're sleeping, the neshama leaves the body. Then when the neshama leaves the body, that's when the Navi can get nevuah. In the middle of the day, Nevi'im didn't get nevuah. Moshe Rabbeinu got nevuah in the middle of the day. Moshe Rabbeinu said, hey, they had a question, 1 minute, let me ask God. Imdu v'eshma ma'idaber Hashem elai. In a second. He wanted in the middle of the day, in broad daylight, in the neshama in the body, he was able to work it out. Why? So the Medrash says, because Moshe Rabbeinu says in Zaysa Bracha, Moshe Rabbeinu is Ishu Elokim. Yeah? A man of God. And the Medrash says, it's a very powerful language. The Medrash says, what does it mean, Ishu Elokim? He was half man, half God.
He was what?
Half man, half God.
Oh.
They say, in our worlds, they say, there was a very famous chassid, Rebbe Parasher. There's another very great chassid, Pesach Malstovsker, whatever. And they said that other chassidim were greater chassidim than Rebbe Hillel Parasher. Why? So they said, because Rebbe Hillel Parasher was half chassid, half Rebbe. And all the other chassidim were only chassidim. So they were greater chassidim than Rebbe Hillel, because Rebbe Hillel was half Rebbe. Therefore, Rebbe Hillel Parasher is Maamarim, are brought down by the Rabbeim in Chassidus. The Rebbe Rashab, they called the Rebbe Hillel Parasher Chassidus. They say he was half Rebbe. They said, by Moshe Rabbeinu, Ishu Elokim, he was half man, half God. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu was Nisnaba B'zeh. Zeh is like you see it. Moshe Rabbeinu was able to see with this magnifying glass distant things, bigger things than all the other Nevi'im. So what are mitzvahs are in the Neshama in Gan Eden? Mitzvahs become das Paklaya Mir like Moshe Rabbeinu, that is able to see, but the problem is Moshe Rabbeinu did it in the body. We have this in Gan Eden where we're out of the body. Big deal, But the mitzvahs you do create a magnifying glass that allows the neshama in Gan Eden to see infinite level, even though the neshama in Gan Eden itself is limited.
That's why Moshe put an accusation with his wife.
Afterwards, yeah, because he had to be on a high, pure level. And what's the second level of glass? It's called a spiegel. The Alter Rebbe says the Yiddish word. Spiegel is a mirror. And a mirror, you know what a mirror is?
No, I heard so many times Spiegel, so many languages, I never knew.
There's a name, Spiegel.
Yeah.
In English, it's called Spiegel.
He's a big football player, Rabbi.
Spiegel literally in Yiddish means mirror. By the way, lahavdil a billion, there's a lot of Germans, goyim, that are called Spiegel because it's a German word, Yiddish word. Spiegel is a mirror. What's a mirror? Mirror is the opposite. Not only does a mirror not make you see further in an Ar Yasha direct way, He says, "Sheyesh masa v'kisa l'schuchis." There's a covering in the back of the glass. Ava masach eino davar of. Because if you have glass with a thick backing, you're not going to see yourself either. It's not a mirror. You're just going to see nothing. You can see a piece of glass. A mirror is when there's a thin covering behind it. Shul master legaena adavar of is not a thick thing. Shul master legami umachasa and covers the light. Rak davar dak v'kolush. It's only very thin, like silver. Then when you look into the mirror, then you see backwards, what's called Or Page, the bouncing back light. Like we learned, there's a Aveda that God comes down, like Torah. Hashem comes down to us, and then there's the Aveda Satfila, that the Jew goes up. That's Aspakayim She'enamida, that's a mirror. There's a famous story. There was a great chassid of a certain tzaddik that he was very generous, very hospitable, and so he gave him a bracha to get rich. Become very rich. You know the story? Yeah, he became very rich. But then when he became very rich, he stopped being charitable and he stopped being hospitable. Typical. And the Rebbe realized it's his fault. He gave him the bracha. So he went to him. Like this, he never gave people money. He'd send the butler to send them away, all that. The Rebbe comes to his house. He tells the butler, tell him it's me. Oh, the Rebbe brings him into the house. The Rebbe brings him over to the window. He says, what do you see through the window? He says, I see Yankel the tailor and this lady and then, And then he takes him over to his mirror in the back of the room. And he says, what do you see now? He says, I see myself. So the Rebbe says to him, I don't understand. That's glass and this is glass. Why this glass you see through? And this glass you only see yourself. And the Rebbe continues talking. He says, oh, I know why. Because the back of this mirror has silver. Maybe if I rub off a little bit of the silver, then you'll see somebody else. And he said that I got the message. And he changed. You understand? There's a spakaya meira that you see through, and there's a spakaya you only see yourself. And sometimes the silver makes a person only see himself. You have to rub off the silver. Generally speaking, again, there's infinite levels in each one. Pesach is Or Yashar. Right. Shuva Tishrei is Or Chayzer. Generally speaking, learning is Or Yashar, bringing God down. Davening, you refining yourself, taking the animal soul and bringing it up as a carbon. That's Or Chayzer. In Torah, you have both levels, and each one is composed of all the other ones. The real you. Especially if it's a magnifying mirror. then you really only see yourself.